Hello, everybody. Here we are again, live on Broadcast Team Alpha, YouTube, 3 TV stations, satellite radio, and a bunch of other places we put it out. Here we are again, live, and we are here for some cutting-edge conversations, 3 TV talking about quantum possibilities. My name is Augie, and I'm one of the hosts. My co-host, Nori, could not be here today. Something private is going on, but I promise her smiling face will be here next week. I shouldn't promise for her, but I almost guarantee it. Now, we have a phenomenal guest with us here. We're going to have some really good discussions. But first, I want to tell you how you can connect with us. You will find us on broadcastteamalpha.com. And you will find us on YouTube with the same name, and Facebook. And while you are on YouTube, look down into the shows there. And of course, if you go to broadcastteamalpha.com, we have the shows there also. And check out the picture gallery. There is 5,000 plus pictures of unbelievable things that should not exist, but does. No, you're going to like that one. And a lot of the stuff that you're not supposed to know about. So anyway, while you are on YouTube, please also subscribe. It'll help us to get the numbers up there. And if you like what you hear, please support us also by the Super Chat. It is just like Christmas Eve when we get a Super Chat coming in, because that is great. Thank you. And it also tells us that we are doing the right thing. And now I want to tell you something about the guest, because I've been looking forward to this since we booked her to get her on. This is going to be good. We have Patricia Baker. And we are kind of colleagues of sort, because she is also a radio talk show host. She's got the show called Supernatural Girlz, with a Z at the end. That's a new one. And she's a true celebrity. Her podcast is recognized in the top 5% of podcasts globally. So listen really close. There's going to be some interesting things coming your way. She's also a paranormal researcher for over 30 years. An investigative writer, producer, screenwriter. She's been doing dream analysis for well over 20 years and still maintain a private practice doing that. She has written for major magazines, worked with Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute. Boy, oh boy, that sounds interesting. Maybe we should visit that one, because that's something really unique. And also, she is trained with Native American medicine men or medicine women, shamans, I suppose. And she has a book in the writing coming out soon. And I want to hear about that, because when interesting people write books, interesting stuff comes out. So be looking for that one, and we're going to hear more about that. She's also helped to re-release a New York bestseller book about President Eisenhower's close encounters. Now, we know President Eisenhower had that close encounters. There were witnesses that saw the ship on the other side of the military base. They knew the president was on site. And yes, we know it happened. And I want to hear more about that, because it's been, I've known about that for decades. And this is, I want to ask her. We haven't talked about it yet, so it'll be just as good for me as it will be for you folks. So welcome to the show, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Augie. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight.
Oh, this is going to be fun. So fun.
Yes.
Yeah. When we talk to someone like you, that you've been around a long time in the paranormal field, you've seen so much, and you know so much, you experience so much there. But take it back to the beginning. How did it start for you that you got interested in these things and not just stay in the business world and the home world and take care of yourself and your family? And why did you step out of the box and kick the box or trample it so it don't even exist anymore?
You know, Augie, it was always a part of my life. I couldn't get away from it. I was born into it. When I was a child, I was seeing things in my room. I would end up screaming in the middle of the night because it scared me. And then what I realized was, oh my goodness, I think I became more scared of my family members than I was of what I was seeing in the paranormal. And so, but you know, that door began to shut a little bit, and I found myself really, really wanting to know more. And it came to me pretty easily. So I was able to see, I had inner vision. I was always kind of a weirdo. I always believed that angels existed, that UFOs existed, that Bigfoot existed. In fact, Bigfoot was one of the things that scared me in my room at first. So it was always with me. And unfortunately, our society and culture at that time really didn't accept it. It was considered the fringe for so many years. And until recently, really, I think the last 5 to 10 years, things started to shift and change and allow us a lot more to talk about with each other without being made fun of. So I just could never walk away from it. I enjoyed being in the business world. I still am to some degree. My first love is the paranormal.
Yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah, I know you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, when we talked before the show, you mentioned an incident where someone was abducted, or actually kind of abducted, I guess, but taken onto a ship, and there is probably one of the most interesting abduction stories that I've heard of. And you sent me kind of a script on it, and I read that, and boy, oh boy, could we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the absolute best UFO abduction stories ever. Very few people know about it. I'm writing a book about it called Colors in the Dark. And it is the story of Marianne Shenefield. She was a farm girl from Agawam, Massachusetts. And in 1952, her older brother and her father decided to go off and build a tree fort. Marianne was quite upset because they left her behind. So she decided she was going to go build her own tree fort. She was quite stubborn. And her feelings were hurt, so she grabbed some boards and a hammer and nails and got on her bicycle, and off she went to the far edge of the farm property. So the property was pretty significant in size, but her parents didn't want her going as far as she went. But she was angry and annoyed and feeling hurt, so off she went to the far edge of the property. And she started to unload her bicycle, the boards, the nails, the hammer, and she saw something overhead. It was a silver object. It didn't make any sound at all. Now, keep in mind, this is 1952. This is a long time ago. People weren't talking about UFOs. This little girl was 11 years old, and she was like a little Lulu comic girl type of girl. She, if you remember Little Lulu, I know I'm probably dating all of us that do at this point, but she had no concept of aliens or UFOs, nothing at all. She heard branches crackling behind her, and when she turned around, she faced what she called a little boy from China in a scuba diving suit with a belt that had bright colored lights on the buckle. And this little boy was obviously an extraterrestrial, took her aboard the ship. Now, when she got on the ship, she was pretty petrified. And she started screaming at them and saying, my daddy's going to come looking for me. He's going to come and, and get me back. They put her in front of a machine which it was kind of like an MRI. Of course, they didn't have MRIs back then, but she could see all of her organs moving on the screen that this machine was projecting onto. And she threw up. It just made her sick to her stomach. And of course, she's still carrying on. She wants to go home, et cetera, et cetera. But they were very overall kind to her. They eventually returned her to the property. And she ran to an old tree and lied down and just basically kind of passed out. I think she was in somewhat of a shock, having had this experience. And it was evening by the time she finally got up and walked home. Her parents obviously were frantic. She was in her own zone at that point. She walked into the house. She slammed the bedroom door, turned her music on loud, and she didn't want to talk to anybody. Now, her parents were out of their minds. They thought she had been abducted by a human, by a person, possibly a male who had molested her, whatever. I mean, they didn't know what happened to her. And she kept talking about the little boy from China and the car from heaven. What a perfect description for someone who has no experience with extraterrestrials, has no knowledge of extraterrestrials. So about 6 months later, she began to go blind. She was losing her central vision, with macular degeneration was the term. It was not unusual. I mean, it's a rare disease, but at the same time, there was no cure, especially then. Her father did take her to a number of specialists in Boston. There was nothing they could do. So the vision declined. And she was the odd person out. She could not do what her friends were doing. She couldn't learn to drive. You know, she couldn't do a lot of the things her friends could do. She had to wear big, thick glasses and sit in the front of the class. It was a very difficult time for her.
Yeah.
And as she got older, she was living in her home in Agawam, and it was down the street from her parents' home. And she was a young adult. She was going out to meet with her friends to have a good time. But what happened was, instead, she kept hearing a beeping noise. She was alone in the house. She went to see where this beeping noise was coming from. At this point, she's pretty much blind, but she's following this noise. She feels something grab her hand. She is floating through the fields behind her home. There's 500 acres of farmland behind that home. And she was once again aboard a ship. This time, it was a very different experience. She actually had a conversation with the aliens on board the ship. She saw a human body. She asked what happened to this man, and they told her that he had died in a war, but for some reason, they had his body. So when she finally got back home, it was very late. Her friends were worried sick about her, didn't know why she didn't show up. So it was, again, after that experience that her sight returned. But this time, it wasn't through her physical eyes. She was driving with a friend. Her friend was driving. She was in the passenger seat. She felt and saw with her inner sight this blue spiral come from behind her and hit her in the back of the head. And then all of a sudden she could see. She could see the color of the house they were driving by. She could see the people walking on the street. And she was so excited. She was so exhilarated. She's like, oh my God, I can see. And she's screaming to her friend, I can see. She calls her doctor. When she gets home, her doctor thinks she's hallucinating. There's no way that she could possibly see. Marianne went on to become the most talented and powerful person in the psychic world I have ever met. Because what she did and what she was capable of went way beyond psychic. I mean, she could look at you, Augie. She could tell you everything about yourself. She could tell you where you came from, your genetics. She could tell you if you had any health problems. She could tell you what you ate for dinner. I mean, she could tell you everything. And she could do that easily. It was very little effort on her part. And I witnessed this many, many times with her. She also had this strange ability to be able to jump onto somebody's frequency. For example, when I knew her, I was still a therapist, and I was in my office in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. And my client and I are smelling cigarette smoke. Now, I didn't smoke. My client didn't smoke. But Marianne smoked. And we smelled smoke, a lot of cigarette smoke. So I called her up and I said, "Are you smoking?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm smoking like a chimney. I can't stop. And I was thinking about you." I'm like, "We can smell your cigarette smoke." I mean, that's how powerful she was. So she was an amazing individual. Unfortunately, she passed away, but she was incredible. And when I first met her, she was furious with the extraterrestrials because she blamed them for her loss of vision. She thought that they took her vision from her. Yeah. And at that time, she was drinking quite heavily because she wanted to get away from the symbols and all of the things that she was seeing. She never saw darkness once that blue spiral hit the back of her head. So she would close her eyes, like you and I would close our eyes, we'd see darkness. Mm-hmm. She never saw darkness after that time. So it was very, very difficult to manage. And so she took to drinking. I met her. I convinced her to stop drinking. She did. And we did a lot of research together, and it was extraordinary. She was also quite human, and she had her failings. She could be so difficult. At one point, she was going to stop smoking. She was out to have dinner with her husband, and she said to her husband, Danny, she said, "Danny, I want a cigarette." And he said, "No, you can't have a cigarette. Look, you've gotten this far without smoking, no cigarette." Well, she got furious, and she slammed her hand on the table, and she blew up the transformer for the entire street. So she was capable of doing all kinds of things like that. Lots of times it was not in her control, but when she got angry, things would move around the room. I've seen her swing chandeliers and all kinds of things just take off because when she was annoyed, the energy would just start bleeding out.
Wow, so she gained some abilities from that contact. Do you think they actually gave it to her, or maybe there's something that just happened? They've been known to help people like this.
I think they gave it to her. I think they gave it to her, Augie. I really do. It was such an unusual ability. The ability to see. I mean, she could see, but not with her physical eyes.
Yeah.
So when the state wanted her to have training on how to use a cane, for example, as a blind person, she thought it was ridiculous. She said, "I'm not going to do that." So they convinced her to go to an auditorium and meet with them, and they were going to teach her how to use this cane. So they picked up a penny, they took her down to one end of the auditorium, and they threw the penny all the way down to the other end. And then they pulled out the cane to begin to show her. Well, she just walked right down the other end of the auditorium and picked up that penny. And they said they didn't know what to do. They were just flabbergasted. Here was this blind woman, but yet she was able to do that. They didn't bother her after that. But she was very much a focus of Dr. Andrea Puharich. He was very intrigued with her, and he also did a lot of research with her.
The amazing thing is that she may have been physically blind, but she saw with her mind, because I've seen some videos of little girls in India. They put blindfolds on them and give them a book, and they read through the blindfold. And yes. I think some people call that third sight or second sight, but it's reading with your mind is actually a real thing. It's been investigated, and they can't really figure out what it is, but it works. So that's what she gained then, probably.
Yes, and more, because as I mentioned, she could tell you what your medical conditions are.
Yeah.
And She could look right inside your body and tell you what was going on, and she'd be right. She would be dead on right every time. The other thing that was so interesting.
Is she still around?
No, she passed away last year.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, actually, it was 2 years ago, I believe. It was before COVID. She passed away. But here's another thing that she told me. She knew when somebody was going to die. And how she would know, she said, everybody has 3 clocks in their energy system. And all these clocks have different times. But when you're going to die, those clocks all have the same time on them.
Oh.
And she would know by looking at the clocks when someone was going to pass away.
Well, that is looking beyond the physical. In the physical, right. I don't think that clock would exist, but outside of that, where time and space does not exist, that's probably where she was looking at the clock.
Right. So she was amazing. I hope someday somebody will do a movie about her life, because she was incredible and difficult. Because how do you manage this? I mean, if you think about it, you have to have skills that nobody else has, that nobody could even teach you, because nobody's done this before.
Yeah.
So she could be a challenge.
Wow. Boy, what a life.
Yeah.
What a life she had.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, she was quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, and hardly anybody knows about it. That's amazing. Well,
very few people know about it, and that's why I wanted to write the book, so people would know about her. And it's perfect for a television series or a movie, because everything she went through was so visual. You know, seeing those symbols for the first time and trying to get rid of the symbols because she didn't want to see them anymore. There's just so much to it.
Yeah, she must have helped a lot of people in her life.
She really did. And she showed all of us what's possible. You know, the people that knew her, we were right there to go beyond. Only one time was I able to see in the same way she saw. And I can't explain why it happened, but all of a sudden I could see the energies like she saw them. And it was exhausting. I was exhausted after an hour of it. It was very, very different. So, yeah, you'd have to learn, again, new skills that nobody else has ever had.
Do you think that happened to you because you were maybe in her presence, or some ability that she was able to transfer?
I wasn't in her presence when it happened. I was in my office and I was working with a group of sisters at the time. And I don't know why it happened, but all of a sudden it did. And it was quite interesting. And as I mentioned, I'm very exhausted. I had to go lie down afterwards.
Yeah.
Because watching live energy as it really is, it's like, I don't even know. I have no words for it. Really, no words.
Yeah. Would that be something that you would have wanted to have, that kind of ability?
I would if I could manage it and still have my physical sight. I would not want to lose my physical sight in order to have that. But yeah, I think it would be a very interesting and intriguing way to look at the world. If you could turn it on and off. She could not turn it on and off.
Okay, so she kind of lost her physical sight altogether, and that just had this?
Yes. Oh. Yes.
What did that actually, I'm trying to visualize this, what did it actually look like? Was it kind of like looking into a kaleidoscope, or with the moving energies all the time, or was it just something that we would see now, but more to it?
It was really like if you could see beyond this reality into the energy that connects all of us. I was working with sisters. There were like 5 of them or something. And all of a sudden, what I saw were these huge, what should I call them? Like tubes, but solid tubes of energy connecting each and every one of them. And it was alive. I mean, that energy was alive. It had consciousness. It moved. It shifted. It changed. It connected these sisters together as they spoke to each other. You could see the lines shooting out, and they were thick. I mean, they weren't like tiny little, just small lines. They were thick energy lines. They were powerful.
Wow. You saw the movies, The Matrix, didn't you?
Yes. Oh, yes.
I tell you, whoever wrote the script to those movies, they knew something.
They sure did. They sure did. Yes. Yes, indeed.
Maybe it was something similar as that. Maybe they heard about this, whoever wrote that, and maybe they drew some of that knowledge into the movie.
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know what I would do if I had that ability. I know I would just kind of let everything go and go out there and help the world with it. But it could be maybe a little too overwhelming. Because I imagine that everybody with a sore toe is going to show up at your door, possibly.
She really didn't do a lot of healing. She did some, but she was very much interested in research and learning more about things and people, and more than she was into the healing of each individual. She did know who a real healer was, though. She could tell by looking at them.
Okay. Well, that could end up with healing, because then once you know what the problem is, then you can go and correct it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Man, I can imagine what she went through. That would have been very interesting. And there are hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of people that has been abducted around the world. Mm-hmm. And they've had experiences like this, maybe not the same results, but in the past, people just laughed at them, but not anymore. There is an opening up coming now. That ball is rolling. It's kind of like a snowball going downhill. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and whoever gets in his way, they're going to be kind of flat. It's coming.
I hope so. Yes. Yeah.
Government cannot keep it under the rug much longer. It's impossible. There's too much has come out. And they have plans, for the aliens, fake alien invasion and all those things. It's not going to work. There's too many people that has woken up, and they are not going to have it.
That's right. I agree.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Good for you.
Hey, we're at the bottom of the hour here, and I want to say something. Nori and I on Broadcast Team Alpha has actually never had sponsors or commercial advertisements on the show, but we changed our mind because I found Tyler's Coffee. I drink coffee. I drink it for two big reasons. Tyler's Coffee has a very special taste to it, and I love it. Most good coffees have a special taste that some people get drawn to, and others maybe just don't care for it. But this one I like, and there's another reason. That is that this Tyler's Coffee is acid-free. The only acid-free coffee we know about. And that means that when you drink acid-free coffee, it does not bring the pH of the body down into an area where you are more prone to get sick. Neutral at 7, when you get your pH value of the body down at 6 or below, it is just a matter of time before you could get sick. When you keep it at 7 or above, you're going to stay mostly healthy because just like Dr. Warburg figured out in 1932, bacteria and virus cannot live in a heavy oxygenated and alkaline environment. So if your pH value stays at 8, you're not going to get sick. And that's another reason why I want to stay with this coffee. And I see we have some changes on the screen here. But I know the family. I know the Ornstein family. They are here in Tucson. I've known them for 21 years. It is, they're good folks, and they are, here we're back again. All right. They're good folks, and they would not pull anything over on people like this. This is probably the best coffee that I've ever run across. And that's what I wanted to say here. And I'm going to give you another shot of it. Here's a shot of coffee. Tyler's Coffee. You will find it in stores, or you can go to their website at tylerscoffees.com. That is Tyler's Coffees with an S at the end, .com. Go there and have a look and try it out. You probably will fall in love too, like I did. So that's it for that message. Now, I know that you have helped out getting a book issued about President Eisenhower and his close encounters with extraterrestrials.
Well, actually, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We know
President Eisenhower, Paul Blake Smith.
Yeah, we know he had that contact because there were witnesses to it at the time. There were people on the airbase that saw the ship coming down. They knew the president was on site, and they knew the contact happened. So what more can you tell us about this? Because this is fascinating to me.
Well, what I can tell you is that Paul Blake Smith is a great author. He's written several UFO books. He's a great researcher. And he was able to take all of these jigsaw puzzle pieces and bring them together and make a very compelling case that this really did happen. But I want you to have Paul on the show so he can tell you himself, because it is an amazing story. And a lot of the facts that he was able to put together, it just makes a lot of sense. Now, he was unable to get any of the the classified material, obviously, but he was able to get enough material to make sure that when you read this book, you walk away feeling like, yes, this did in fact happen. And that was the beginning of our secrecy program. That's when it started. And it continues, obviously, to this day, even though we had this crappy Pentagon report that we were supposed to think something about. I mean, this secrecy is still going on. You know, for them to say they don't know who's behind these ships. Oh, come on. We all know who's behind these ships. They're not human. Yeah. So, yeah. But Paul is great at telling his story, and I will make sure that you talk to him to bring him on the show. Just to clarify, his book was not a reissue. His is a brand new book that came out in November of last year. The book that I had reprinted as an agent was The Andreasson Affair. That was another abduction story that did take place in Massachusetts in the 60s, many, many years ago. Oh, yeah. So that book has been reprinted, and it's still selling like crazy because it is one of the most highly documented cases in the world.
I think, though, that in that meeting with the Eisenhower and the extraterrestrials on their ship, not everything went good for us. From what I understand, and talking to Laura Eisenhower, his granddaughter, he traded us away in return for technology. He allowed them to abduct humans, but he gave a limit to how many, and he also asked them that we want to know who it is. And then in return for that, we got technology from them. Well, they didn't kind of didn't stay with that contract. David abducted millions since then that he did not give them the right to do. But we still got the technology. So,
and I think that's one of the reasons why they're still not telling the truth about what's going on, because they would have to be held accountable for allowing this to happen to so many people, and not only allowing them to be abducted, but also the government, as you well know, has harassed these people endlessly. They have followed them, they have tapped their phones, they have done all kinds of things to keep an eye on them, and they'd have to be accountable for that too, and they're not about to share any of it.
Yeah, and on top of that, some of these abductions were people that brought onto a flying disc. You see, they have seen the grays there, they've seen the tall whites, and they've seen humans in military uniforms on the same ship. So we know there is a cooperation between a form of government and the extraterrestrials in the process of abducting people.
Yes. Yes.
Now that disgusts me.
Me too. I'm right with you, Augie. I think it's absolutely horrific. But look at what's happening today. The government is really exposing itself for what they really are. You know, they don't care about us. You know that. Everybody who has been looking at this with open eyes knows that. But I've watched it, as you have, for many years in the UFO field. And the people that have tried to come forward, you know, they've been treated horribly by our own government.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many wild stories when it comes to abduction. There are people that have been abducted, brought onto the ship, and kind of left alone for a while. So they walked off into other rooms, and they saw dead human bodies in containers. And we know there is stuff going on there that really... I'm losing words here, and that don't happen a lot. But this needs to be public knowledge. So maybe it all goes back to Eisenhower and that meeting when they were given permission, because there is universal law saying that we have to have permission to do something to someone else. He gave them permission.
They absolutely did. I agree with you. I think that absolutely happened. And again, you know, we're dealing with more than one race of extraterrestrial, and we're also dealing with interdimensionals. It's not just one thing. Yeah. And I do feel that the government knows a lot, but there's a lot they also don't know. Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, and there's a FBI document that dates back into the late 50s where they said that we have discovered that most flying discs come from interdimensional areas. So, we don't only have our reality, there is other parallel worlds that they're coming in here visiting from. And maybe they are also curious and take some of us and bring them back over there to do whatever they do. And I hope it's not hamburgers. It's they do what they do, and then they bring them maybe back. And there are some that has been abducted and never show up again. So because, you know, yes. In the woods, in the forest, in the national forest, there's a lot of people disappearing. We wonder, where do they go?
That is a very frightening situation, and especially because the national parks refuse to release lists. They refuse to release records, and David Paulides has done an amazing job being a great detective to put all of this together in a cohesive fashion so we can understand it. Yeah. But once again, here are people associated with the government that are unwilling to come forward and tell the truth.
Yeah.
I did have somebody on my show. His handle is Covert Disclosure 441, and he asked me to write questions to him, and then he used a voice synthesizer so you couldn't hear his real voice, and he answered the questions. He claims to work at a facility where they hold cryptids and all kinds of other types of creatures. And he answered all the questions, and it was a fascinating interview. And at the same time, it made me think a lot about, gee, I don't think I'm going to go hiking in those forests. I don't think that's where I want to go. After hearing what he had to say, the people are being taken, and they're being taken by interdimensionals, they're being taken by ETs, and by cryptids. All three.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, you have some personal experiences also with abnormalities that you probably won't find in the box, but way outside of the box. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Oh, yes. Oh, sure. I've got some great stories for you. I'll make this short because I know we're running out of time here, and I'd like to get to a couple other things with you. Mm-hmm. We had a medium on the show, and we kept hearing a squeaky chair. Loud, squeaky, like an office chair, squeak, 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 to the point where it was so annoying. Finally, I took our guest into this quiet room that we have, and I said, hey, you got to change your chair because we keep hearing this loud, squeaky noise. She said, it's not me. I'm sitting in a dining room chair. Well, I knew it wasn't me, and I knew it wasn't my co-host. So I talked about it on the air, and as soon as I brought it up and I said, we have a visitor, and he's not being nice. And so we talked about it a little bit, and it stopped. But after the show, I took a picture in the room, and the picture clearly showed a devil head. Clearly.
Really?
So, yes. So I called up the medium, and I said, listen, you've got something following you around. I'm going to send you a picture. You can see what it is. But you need to clear this because it's following you. And as it turned out, she had pneumonia and she wasn't healing very well. So here was this thing that had latched onto her, but it had it was a devil's head. I should send you the picture. It was very, very obvious. And I even sent it to a psychiatrist who's an exorcist, Dr. Gallagher. And I said, what do you think of this picture? And he said, clearly, it's the devil. So it's interesting. We have to, in this paranormal field, always make sure that we're clearing our field, that we're bringing in what we want to bring in with joy and love. And we don't really want to get involved with the other stuff. So that's one story. Another story is Robin Foy in the UK was the lead medium with a group of mediums that did something called the Skull Group. Now, this happened in Skull in the UK. They would meet several days a week, and they were able to produce actual physical manifestations from the other side. Real stuff. They got the Academy of Psychic Exploration interested in what they did over in the UK. They got involved with it. They would take Polaroid film and put it in the center of their table, and afterwards photographs would show up. But they also had full body materializations, newspapers falling out of the air. They were able to prove there is life after death. There is life beyond this reality. They did this for 5 years. I had Robin on my show. 3 nights before he came on, my bedroom filled up with all these people. And I didn't recognize any of them, but I knew somehow they were associated with Robin. As it turned out, they were Robin's spirit team because they worked with a team from the other side. Mm-hmm. Because when you are part of a team, your energy becomes more powerful.
Yeah.
So they had all these amazing people on their team. They were suddenly in my bedroom, like, why are these people here? I didn't understand until a couple of interviews later why they showed up. 5 years into this amazing experience with the Skull Project, where they had produced evidence all the way around, they were visited by a Time Lord who told them they would no longer be allowed to meet with their spirit team from the other side. Now, they were devastated because they were very close to the spirit team. The spirit team was like family to them. But what had happened was there was another group like theirs in the future. That group was trying to contact Robin's group. And the Time Lord said, no, we cannot allow it because it's going to create too many rifts in time and it's going to be a big mess. We cannot have this happen. And as a result, you will no longer be allowed to do this. Well, they tried it anyways. And what would happen was each time they would go to sit, they would be hit with these absolutely horrible noises. Horrible, shrieking noises so that they couldn't do what they normally did, which was connect to this team. So what I then realized was the reason I saw these people in my room is because that team was looking for some new people to work with.
Okay.
That's why they showed up. So, but it took me a while to get all the pieces together because Robin didn't tell me what had happened until the third interview that I had with him. But Robin's an amazing medium, and he and his group continue doing work, obviously not with the same team, but now they're in Spain, and they're still doing their sitting together. There's a great movie I want to recommend to everybody. It's called The Afterlife Investigations, and it's all about Robin's work and what they were able to produce. Just incredible.
I'm
So,
gonna write that.
yeah, The Afterlife Investigations. It's on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna write that down. Okay, good. I'm gonna have a look at that. Well, speaking with dead folks, it is not as hard as we think. But do you think that first team have found a home by now?
Yeah, we still work with them because we started American School over here, and I worked with several different mediums on it, and just recently started it up again. And yeah, some of the same members showed up to work with us.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. So we've gotten some very interesting photographs. We are not at the level of Robin and all of his team yet. We hope to be there someday.
Really? Yeah. Spirit communication, that's kind of an interesting subject. And for those of you out there listening, go ahead and investigate the Tesla Spirit Radio.
Oh.
It is a radio that he invented, I think, in 1901 or 2 or 3 or something like that. Simple radio, about 8 parts to it, plus the antenna. And when Nikola Tesla first invented it, he said it scared the daylight out of him because I was alone in the laboratory in the middle of the night, and I heard voices talking to each other, and I did not understand their language. Well, Tesla understood 7 languages, so it was not a common language. And there are people on YouTube that has put this contraption of a radio together, and you can hear some really strange stuff.
That'd
be good for you guys to investigate.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, you have a book coming up also. What do you plan to do in that book?
Well, I have 2 books. I have Marianne's story, which I'm calling Colors in the Dark. Actually, that was her title that she came up with years ago. And I also have another book called No Time to Cry, The Search for a Medical Miracle. And that's about my journey with scleroderma. I was diagnosed a number of years ago. It's a deadly autoimmune disease. There's no cure for it. And it put me on a different path for a while where I really had to find out what to do to save my own life. Nobody was going to do it for me. I had to do it myself.
Wow. That's a lonely feeling, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't, because I was able to meet other people like me who had been diagnosed and had the same mindset. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to find out what causes it. We're going to find a cure. And we've come pretty close, actually. We really have. Because it was known as a skin disorder. It's not. It's a blood disorder. So it's very different. And I think that's one of the reasons they've never found really a good treatment for it, let alone a cure, because they're looking in the wrong place. And the disease has been around and known about for many years. So
yeah. Anytime we are looking at the establishment's medical procedures, we are very often looking in the wrong place.
that is so true, Augie. It really is. I mean, we are a very good and solid medical country for emergencies, crisis medicine. But when it comes to chronic illness, we fall far short.
Yeah. Yeah, emergency medicine is phenomenal. They can do magic just about. There are things they can do that would just totally blow you away to save lives, and they do it every day. But don't go to them with, I don't say don't go to them, just do. If you're in the box and that's the only thing you believe on, then good luck with you. But there are helps and there are remedies, and it is published in the medical journals, and you'll find it in older medical information, like 1931, Dr. Warburg. He told us how to cure just about anything by raising the pH and get oxygen into the body. So that's really simple.
Exactly. Well, if you know more than anybody knows what's really going on with the medical field today, and it's all about following the money. However, it did show me, having to deal with this issue, that there's always a way. If you just set your mind to it, there's always a way. You're going to find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that will help until you're finally free of at least most of the symptoms. So there are a lot of people I know who have this, who do follow traditional medical care, and they are in wheelchairs. They are waiting for lung transplants, and it's a really horrible way to live. I just never followed that road, and I had a very aggressive case of this when it first started. It really took me by surprise because I've been so healthy for so long.
Yeah.
So, but again, like you mentioned, there's so many other alternatives. You just have to be willing to kind of use yourself as a guinea pig and give them a try. So the book is about that. And I want people to know there are many ways to look for health.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much out there that can be very helpful, but it's hardly ever spoken of in medical circles. We have to find it on our own. Exactly. We do. And I tell everybody, listen, if you get diagnosed with this and you follow what your doctor orders, you're going to die like a dog. Or you can read up on all these other things, and you can listen to people who've tried other things and succeeded. And then you have a whole different life ahead of you. So give it a chance. So that's what the book's about. And it's not that I haven't lost friends along the way. I have. I mean, some of my friends have died from this disease, and it's a very sad loss. Yeah. But a lot of the people who have it have tried new things, and they're right with me today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people a lot of times, they don't know where to go research. Hey, try medical journals. Go to Lancet, go to New England Journal of Medicine, go in there and use the search feature. You'd be amazed what you can find. Herbal medicines, you can find, anything. Well, there's also, I'll share this with you. There's also drugs that have been repurposed. As you know, there are some drugs that were discovered and used for one purpose, but they can be used for another. And I'll give you a great example. One of my friends has scleroderma, and she was at a stage where her esophagus and her intestines were totally paralyzed with scar tissue, because that's one of the things the disease creates, is scar tissue everywhere. So her doctor said, we're going to have to remove your intestines. We don't know what else to do for you. You can't eat, you can't eliminate. But there's a drug in Italy. You can try it. Now, this drug in Italy was basically invented for idiopathic constipation. So my friend said, I'm going to get it. It cost $500 for 30 pills. She got them sent over from Europe. She took them for 4 months at a fairly high dose, around 4.5 milligrams. And at the end of her treatment, they took films of her intestines and her esophagus, and it was like a baby's.
It had completely healed. So here's the medication that not only could get rid of the horrible symptoms, it rebuilt her intestines and her esophagus. So she's alive today and she's intact. She didn't have to lose her intestines. So she took a risk. She tried something that hadn't been tried before.
Yep.
And it worked.
Yeah, that's what research is all about.
Yeah.
She was asking around. That's a form of research, and she found something. And outside of the box, that's where the solutions are. Because imagine that particular remedy was probably not on the market where it could have been gotten without coming through a doctor. So you have to. Most doctors don't know about this kind of stuff.
No, she was very blessed that her doctor did know about it and was willing to tell her to give it a try. And it worked. It's really miraculous. And a lot of people have benefited, from her doing this because the intestinal symptoms of scleroderma are quite crippling. So other patients have been able to use the medication and benefit as well. So it's great.
I got one more thing that really is fascinating to me, and that is dreams. You've been dealing with that for a long dream interpretations.
Yes.
If somebody has a strange dream or anything like that, should they just pass it off or should they start finding some meaning in it, do you think?
I think everybody should be paying attention to their dreams, especially now, because there's a lot of information that is given freely to everybody in their dreams. You just have to learn what the symbols mean. There are universal symbols like water always means emotion. But then if you're talking about Susie Q in the 5th grade, that's a personal symbol that has meaning only to you. So I used to do dream groups where we'd all come together, 10 to 12 people, and we'd do dream sharing, dream interpretation, and it was wonderfully enlightening. I think people are making a big mistake by not paying attention to their dreams. Just get a notebook, start writing them down every morning. Eventually, you will come to understand that they are communicating very important information to you. The people that I used to work with actually became precognizant through their dreams because they would do this work with me a year or more, and they would know what's coming in the future. They knew 9/11 was coming. They knew different things were coming from watching their own dreams.
And then there are people that say, I never dream. What can they do to bring the dreams out?
They can take certain nutritional supplements. B vitamins are very important to take, but not before bed. You want to take them earlier in the day. There's also teas that you can drink that will help accentuate and bring forward your dreams so you will remember them in the morning. You also need to clear your mind at night. Before you go to sleep, just think about everything that happened during the day, check it off the list, and put it in a box. That leaves you free to explore other realities in your dream.
Yeah, that would make sense. Another thing that I've learned is that if you have a glass of water, this is something that I used to teach in a mind development course I did many years ago. Have a glass of water next to the bed, drink half of it before you go to sleep. And then tell yourself that I will remember every dream and impression that I had while I am sleeping. And then in the morning, first thing, just grab the other half of it and drink it. And for some reason, that seemed to work for people also. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Yes, Augie, that's a great one. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's an excellent way to remember your dreams. Very good.
Yeah.
Carlos Castaneda used to talk about, looking at your hands before you go to sleep at night. Just look at your hands. And then for women, he also mentioned there was 3 fingers below the belly button, that putting pressure on that area in the lower abdomen would also help you remember your dreams. But that was for women, and the hand thing was more for men, but I found them interchangeable. And he was an amazing dreamer. He did an interesting study with the California Institute where there were a number of people that were brought together and said, you keep track of your dreams for the next few months. If anything strange happens, call the Institute. So one morning, they all called the Institute and said, Carlos Castaneda walked into my dream last night and said, hi, I'm Carlos Castaneda. Make sure you call the Institute in the morning. So
Wow.
that is quite a story. It was told to me by Dr. Stuart Twemlow, who's a psychiatrist who I worked with at the Monroe Institute. That really happened.
Wow. That's all right. Well, I see that we're just about done for this one, and this has been such a wonderful, interesting conversation. Could you come back sometime?
I have loved being here with you, Augie. Thank you.
Yeah,
I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah, there's so much more to talk about.
Well, I will promise you. There is, and I promise you the next time I'm on, we will have a faster internet connection so that I'm not blinking on and off with you. But thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight and all of your listeners.
Yeah, thank you very much for being with us. And I have to apologize to the listeners again for Nori not being here. I wasn't thinking of saying it the first time, but one of her dogs died just hours ago, and I told her, take your time off, just spend some time with yourself, and that's what she wanted to do, so that was okay. She'll be back. Her smiling face will be back next week. So and then in the meantime, be good to each other, and thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, Patricia, and we will see you again.
Okay, thank you. Good night.